I'm Mark Caro, and welcome to episode 21 of Caropop. I first met Jody Stephens in April 1993 after a student group at the University of Missouri asked the great cult band Big Star to reunite for their Spring Fest, and miraculously, it did. Almost as miraculously, I convinced the Chicago Tribune's arts and entertainment editor to send me down to Columbia, Missouri to cover Big Star's first concert in almost 20 years. The setting was a tent pitched in a parking lot outside a basketball arena where Bryan Adams would be playing that night. As I wrote in my Tribune story, Diana Stephens, wife of Big Star drummer Jody Stephens, was incredulous. Of all the times people ever brought up a Big Star reunion over the years, who would have thought that this would be the place, she said, as she sold souvenir shirts out of the back of her van. I still won't believe it till I see it. But notoriously enigmatic frontman Alex Chilton actually performed with his old bandmate Jody Stephens, plus Jonathan Auer and Kenneth Stringfellow of the Posies, and this version of Big Star continued playing together for years. When I spoke with Jody Stephens for this Caropop episode, I was wearing the Big Star t-shirt that I bought from Diana out of the back of their van that afternoon. Big Star was a brilliant, soulful power pop band from Memphis with terrible luck that made their music ridiculously hard to find for years. The chief singer-songwriters were Chris Bell, who boasted an obsession for sculpting sound and a Beatles and Birds-like melodic sensibility, and Alex Chilton, who, as the Box Tops lead singer, sang one of 1967's biggest hits, The Letter. The rhythm section of Jody Stephens and bassist Andy Hummel knew how to hold down a groove, but Stephens also could deliver a Keith Moon level of wallop when needed. Big Star's name was aspirational, as was that of its 1972 debut album, Number One Record. That record featured such indelible songs as The Ballad of El Goodo, the much-covered 13, and In the Street, which years later would become the theme song of that 70s show. Yet thanks to the label's distribution issues, Number One Record made it to few store shelves and went virtually unheard. Chris Bell was so disheartened that he left and traveled down a dark path, and the remaining three, Chilton, Stephens, and Hummel, went on to make the more ragged, yet perhaps even more inspired, Radio City. That album featured the should-have-been hits September Girls and Back of a Car, as well as the explosive album opener, Oh My Soul. Yet distribution problems dragged down that album as well, and Hummel quit. That left just Chilton and Stephens to make the harrowing, beautiful Dark Night of the Soul album that went by the titles Big Star's Third and Sister Lovers when it finally came out years after it was recorded. Chilton's songs reflected someone wrestling with powerful demons, while Stephens wrote and sang one of the album's prettiest songs, For You. Jody says his inclusion of a string arrangement on that song led to strings being used all over that album. In the 1980s, Big Star's work became championed and sometimes covered by such bands as the Bangles, REM, the DBs, Let's Active, Game Theory, and the Replacements, whose song, Alex Chilton declares, Jody Stephens went to work at Ardent Studios in Memphis, where Big Star's albums had been recorded and where he still works today. He also has played drums with Golden Smog, a supergroup featuring Jeff Tweedy of Wilco, Gary Loris and Mark Perlman of the Jayhawks, Dan Murphy of Soul Asylum, and Craig Johnson of Run Westy Run. Golden Smog is reunited for 2 shows in Minneapolis in early April. Jody Stephens is the only surviving original member of Big Star. Chris Bell was killed in a car crash in 1978. Alex Chilton died of a heart attack in March 2010, just days before he, Jody Stephens, and original bassist Andy Hummel were scheduled to reunite on stage at the South by Southwest Festival. 4 months later, Hummel died of cancer. Jody continues to play Big Star music live with the Big Star's Third project, which includes Mike Mills from REM, Chris Stamey of the DBs, and Caropop guest Mitch Easter of Let's Active. Recently, Jody has been writing songs and singing them with Luther Russell as the duo Those Pretty Wrongs. Their music not only sounds like the gentle acoustic stuff from Number One Record, but there's a cool connection to that album that Jody talks about here. Jody Stephens is one of the super nice guys in rock. He takes us through what it felt like when Big Star had high hopes, what the creative partnership between Bell and Chilton was like, and what happened when Chilton and Hummel came to blows and started smashing stuff. Also, what did Chilton mean when he sang, "The drummer said you were not very clean and I know what he means"? Please enjoy Jody Stephens and the roller coaster ride that is Big Star on Caropop. I'm wearing the shirt that I bought out of your van in 1993, which is 29 years. That's crazy that it was so long ago.
It's mind-blowing.
But that was when I met you. And I remember one of the, I mean, there were so many things from that concert. It was at Columbia, Missouri. It was in a tent. It was like the university sort of spring festival. And you guys played sort of late afternoon. It was right next to this big basketball arena where Bryan Adams was playing that night. And I think one of the things you said to me that really stuck with me was that you'd said this was like the first time you'd ever played a show in which the audience knew the songs.
That's true. But it's really outside of the Rock Writers Convention that we played in 1973, May of 73, that John King put together.
Right.
You know, he gathered something like 120 rock writers, got stacks to foot the bill and bring them all to Memphis and just have a good time with his intent was, you know, kind of organizing the writers. So as in, you know, a semi sort of union, so they might be able to raise their pay for what they've written. Like the lady said in the Big Star film, it was like herding cats. So,
right. How many shows did you actually do in the first incarnation of Big Star? Like, how many live performances do you think there were total?
Not many. It's kind of easy. I think Andy and Chris and Alex and I played High Cotton here a couple of times. We played New Orleans, a festival there. And we did this thing that Andy dubbed the BC tour that was Athens, Alabama, a university there, and Corinth, Mississippi, and then one other place that I can't remember. But there weren't many. I mean,
there was never like a Big Star tour.
No, we played in Little Rock. We could never find a proper agent nor a proper manager. I mean, nobody was really interested.
So you did way more shows with the sort of reunion band that started from 93 and moved forward from then.
Sure. Yeah. Even as a three-piece, we didn't do that many shows. I mean, we did the Rock Writers kind of convention here that really kind of got us back together and back in the studio to do Radio City. And we played live. We opened for Archie Bell and the Drells. You can imagine how we went over with their audience. One person might clap.
It was probably Alex.
Yeah.
But, I could see Alex being into, doing Tighten Up, joining them on stage for that.
I could too. And who knows? He may have even kind of riffed on that for a half a second. But yeah, just a handful of those dates. And you're right, we did more as in the reincarnation of Big Star with John and Ken.
So Big Star has become this sort of legendary band for two reasons. One is because the music is fantastic and has this lasting power, and you put on those 3 Big Star albums and they really don't sound dated in any sort of way. I mean, it's just sort of amazing, the sort of the clarity and punch and everything from those records. And then the other thing is how terrible the distribution was on those records. And, the fact that you made #1 record and people really didn't get a chance to hear it or even buy it in stores. And, Radio City came out and the Stax distribution with Columbia also was screwed up. And then Big Star's third sat around for a few years. So there was that. I mean, was being in Big Star, was it still fun because you were in a rock and roll band that was making great music, or did that other stuff kind of weigh you down and weigh down the experience?
Well, just to go back to the longevity of the records, aside from Alex and Andy and Chris paying attention to guitar sounds and parts and having, vocals that engage people, John Fry, our mentor, and, certainly he was Ardent's owner and our engineer, is the guy that added the sparkle to it. And I think, it's especially sonically, it's he's the one that added the longevity to it. Sorry, your question about distribution, I was just thinking about, oh, wait a minute, John Fry has to be brought up here. The whole distribution thing, it doesn't, it's all worked out. And thank God for John King, who was our promo guy here, who got our records in the hands of the right writers. and music writers, and they in turn turned on some key folks out there like Mike Mills and Peter Buck and there are a few. Just talking to Susanna Hoffs about someone that I think her tour manager John Kalachi, about having Susanna join us for the 50th anniversary of Number One Records. So, nice. On the bank cut September Girls, and they released it on different light. But there are other folks that I was lucky in that Big Star was a common denominator and being introduced and getting to meet a lot of people that I have a lot of respect for.
When all of this sort of stuff was going on and the sort of the mishaps in the business that we've all heard about, was it still fun being in the band?
Yeah, first thing out of my mouth in talking to newcomers to music is don't do it for the money, do it for the fun of it.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the fun's guaranteed if that's what you're in it for, because it's a lot of fun. And that whole community that develops there, especially with the nucleus of the band and that bond. But I wasn't really in it for the money because I thought that was an unrealistic expectation. I was just in it because I had such great admiration for Chris and Alex and Andy. I'd known Andy since like the 9th grade or something. And he's the one that kind of brought me on board. And then Chris was this amazingly talented guy. And that formed the nucleus of a band. We did gigs and then Alex joined in. So it was, I'm lucky to be here kind of thing. And amazing to be a part of some of these great songs.
So you grew up in Memphis and you learned drums. What was it that inspired you to pick up the drums first?
The Beatles, Ringo Starr, hands down, without a doubt. I even told that to Ringo because Ringo introduced, and this is a little Ringo story. It's a long story. Klaus Voormann did part of his Sideman's Journey album here, kind of retrospective, and then he was nominated for a Grammy. I went to a little gathering for him, and while my wife and I, Diana and I, were waiting for Klaus, we heard that Klaus wasn't going to be able to make it. There had been an accident, and but at any rate, but Ringo walks in, so I introduced myself, and then we get a picture, and then I'm walking back by Ringo again. He goes, "Hey, Jody, come here." He said, "Have you met my friend Jim Keltner?" And I said, "Jim's done some work at Ardent." So he and I talked, and he said, "Well, Jim's the best drummer in the world." And I said, "Well, Ringo, you're the guy that got me into this and kind of inspired what I do." And then Ringo looked at me and he said, "Jim's the best. I'm the greatest." For me, Ringo is the greatest drummer. I mean, it's drummers are all about being the perfect choice for the music they're playing. And you couldn't have gotten anyone more perfect for that than Ringo. As John Lennon said when asked about the difference between Pete Best and Ringo Starr, he said, "Well, Pete Best is a good drummer, but Ringo Starr is a Beatle."
Right, there you go. I defend because people say, "Oh, Ringo is the weak link." I'm like, "Are you insane?" Like, and I always tell people, listen to "I Saw Her Standing There," the first song on their first album, and then listen to anything else from that year or like within a couple of years of it. Like, it's just totally different. And then fast forward to their last album and listen to "Come Together," and it's just he played the songs, and he wasn't this. He didn't draw attention to himself. He just made those songs great.
Yeah, I mean, he was very creative, and he was king of the shuffle, and he could even sing. And remember, Ringo was a left-handed guy, but he was playing shuffles with his right hand. I think anybody who talks about Ringo in those sort of terms has no idea what they're talking about. They don't play drums. They've never tried to play what Ringo plays. So there might be a drummer out there who doesn't have the great appreciation for Ringo that most of us drummers do. But for the most part, I think it's just kind of onlookers making kind of statements.
Did you feel like you were trying to play like Ringo, or was it more like you were inspired by him to sort of find your way into each song the way you would do it?
Both. But I don't think my attempts usually fell short. And that's where, that's how you develop your own personality. And I think that's what happened to the Beatles too, because they were covering Little Richard and a lot of
Absolutely.
Folk. And while they fell short of sounding just like Little Richard, they didn't fall short of delivering a pretty amazing performance and kind of defining it for themselves.
You were in a band Ice Water with Chris Bell and Andy Hummel, which is basically, Big Star until Big Star without Alex Chilton. Were the three of you kind of bound by that Beatles love in doing that band? And was that something that was common in Memphis, or were you sort of outliers at that time? Like, wait a minute, who are these Beatle-y musicians in, Memphis in the early 70s?
Yeah, I can't say for the whole music community, but there were, huge musicians that were huge Beatle fans. But for the most part, what got the most attention around here was kind of blues-based rock, and there were some great bands that did that. But at least initially, we were kind of, in my limited knowledge of what was going on musically around Memphis, we were the only group that was writing songs that kind of inspired by the Beatles. But I mean, there were other inspirations as well. Chris was a huge Led Zeppelin fan, as was I, and you can see that and you can hear that in the street and feel and that kind of attention to guitar work. I don't know. There are Charlie Watts and the drummer for the Booker T and the MGs, Al Jackson, and his kind of approach to things. And there are other influences too, but certainly Ringo. So it's certainly inspired to trying to do things outside of the ordinary to some extent, outside of just keeping a beat, add some sort of personality to the music. And then, there certainly was, what would Ringo do here?
And Alex Chilton had already had a number one hit at the age of 16 with The Letter with the Box Tops. And that band was known as sort of the quote unquote blue-eyed soul. Was he a celebrity to you all? Like when he sort of was joining the band, was it like, wait, we got this big name, or was it just like, he's another musician and we're going to make music together?
I know Alex and Chris and Andy had a past. Alex may have even played in a band with Chris. I'm sketchy about that. So and Alex being, a Memphian, too, I think we all had a tremendous amount of respect for the Box Tops. The Letter, was the number one record in the nation in 1967.
I think it was that was the top song of all records in 1967.
Yeah. Alex saw a lot of success with that. And, but I wasn't really a follower of the band. I did try to go see him once actually, but couldn't get in. So I wasn't starstruck, on meeting Alex, but I did have a tremendous amount of respect for him.
What was the dynamic like between Alex and Chris in terms of writing those songs? Did they mostly have their own songs and sort of put the sort of Lennon-McCartney kind of credits where they were both, doing them together, or were they actually collaborating and coming up with, something like in the Street together?
Usually they would bring the songs and present them at rehearsal, pretty much written. Well, for number one record, certainly, and Radio City. There may have been maybe a couple of things like Daisy Glaze that we kind of fleshed out, and actually got a writer's credit for on Radio City.
Right.
But I don't know that. I would think somebody would initiate the song by presenting lyrics and a melody line, or just lyrics, or, not unlike what Luther and I do. When we started, I had lyrics and melody lines to a couple of songs, and Luther did arrangements and certainly the music. And and then, to some extent, I would think maybe 13 was probably primary Alex. And
I think I read that was when he'd written, like when he saw the Beatles in like 64 or something like that. Like he actually was pretty young when he wrote that one. Yeah.
And Life is Right on number one record, we recorded actually before Alex joined the band, from my recollection, because it appears on this thing called Rock City that we did. Tom Eubanks, and I guess Terry Manning was a part of that too. So, I would, Ballad of El Goodo. Then there's Watch the Sunrise, and I think there's a version of that out there with Chris actually doing a vocal, different melody line, different lyrics, but same musically, and that tuning. Chris was a big fan of Joni Mitchell, so he was into open tunings and stuff. So
I've come to have the impression that number one record is really, like, if you're sort of going to split like the Alex and Chris parts of it, that the majority of that record is more Chris Bell in terms of sculpting the sound and being obsessive in the studio and having this vision for what it was. And even though a lot of people sort of equate Big Star with Alex Chilton, that Chris Bell really was responsible for a lot of the sound of number one record. Would you say that's true?
Yes, certainly in terms of production, and kind of attention to detail. Obviously Alex is a pretty amazingly talented guy, and lent those talents to number one record. But in terms of a direction, I think that was primarily Chris.
How much were you wrapped up in sort of that notion of, you call the band Big Star, the album's called number one record, you've probably finished the record thinking you've made something pretty great. How wrapped up were you in the, success of that record?
I was ecstatic because I'd just been a part of songs that I appreciate as much as, because I was in a cover band prior to joining up with Chris. My brother and I had a few bands, and I think we did a couple of originals or something, but never this kind of serious effort with a studio like Ardent and a mentor and engineer like John Fry. I was just wrapped up in the success and the way the record hit me when I listened back to it, and it sonically, and having been a part of this effort with four other people that would include John Fry. So I know there was a tremendous amount of disappointment on Chris Bell's part, because we did get a lot of great, again, there's John King putting the record in the hands of the right people, but we got a lot of great reviews, and it was unfortunate. Al Bell at Stax had done a deal with Clive Davis at Columbia, and apparently it was a pretty unique deal, and that all looked great. And then Clive promptly left Columbia, and so Al didn't have the same support with the other folks at Columbia that he had with obviously Clive Davis, who had done the deal. So that's kind of how that distribution sort of fell apart. I don't think the remaining people really wanted to work with Stax.
And you're sort of an outlier on Stax, because you're this, poppy, you're a power pop band before that term is really around. You're a rock band that makes really melodic music, but Stax wasn't known for that. And they were so busy kind of retooling their own catalog, putting out so many records to try to make up for the fact that they lost their catalog to Atlantic, that they probably you probably weren't at top of mind with Al Bell at that point either. So you kind of stuck between, fell through the cracks, or whatever the proper metaphor is.
Yeah, I don't know that was the case. I think very much we were at the top of Al Bell's mind, and that's correct. He was trying to grow Stax into someone like Columbia or Atlantic, because they as it turned out, like you said, they didn't have the Otis Redding's catalog, or I don't think they would have had the staple singers anyway, because they were Atlantic artists, I believe, coming into it, and Sam and Dave were, and so yeah, Al gave us some money for promotion. And spent some money, a little money on touring, and we played Max's Kansas City a couple of times, and again, I don't think that was Al falling down. I think it was just the fact that a proper agent wasn't really interested. So I think John King was instrumental in booking dates and maybe getting music writers in certain cities, or to help book a gig for us. It was all kind of an unfortunate sort of turn of events, but I think Stax were doing what they could, and certainly Ardent.
Part of being in a rock and roll band for a lot of musicians is having high hopes and then having them not be fulfilled for whatever reason. Were you surprised at the toll that the commercial, I don't know, I don't even want to say failure, but just kind of the fact that the number one record didn't really take off, the toll it took on Chris Bell, and that it kind of spelled the end of that band, as opposed to you guys just brushing it off and going on to the next one, all four of you?
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is to contrast Chris and I can include Andy on this too. Is that was Chris's life? Chris was meant to be a creator, a musician, write songs, sing, be as brilliant as he was in the studio. That was his calling. Andy and I were both going to school because we figured we needed a backup plan. I was going to it's the University of Memphis now, and he was going to what is now Rhodes College. So kind of we were working on sort of backup plans. And so when it didn't succeed the first time commercially, being in a band and having a released record, not many of those bands ascend to the point of being able to make a career out of it. I don't know, maybe 2 out of 50 or whatever. But so it wasn't surprising. And again, I wasn't in it for the commercial aspect of it. I was in it because it was thrilling, and it fulfilled something in me that I was looking for.
And yeah, I'd read that Chris Bell and Andy had come to blows, and we're smashing each other's instruments. And I don't know if it's because the intention after the album didn't do well or something, but that it becomes sort of a volatile situation. Well,
no, Chris was a perfectionist, and he had known Andy for a long time, and with long relationships, sometimes people can be a bit over the top about how they approach things. But Chris was picking on Andy essentially, and Andy, being very sensible, visited a rehearsal at Alex's house. Andy, being very sensible, said, I think let's call it a day. We can come back tomorrow and resume this. And Andy put his bass down and then was walking toward the front door, and Chris made some sort of barbed comment, and Andy whipped around and went over and clobbered him. And, Chris's glasses were all askew and still on his face. And then Andy turned around and walked out. And so Chris went over and grabbed Andy's Thunderbird bass and broke it into 3 pieces, which strings and things here reassembled. That was great. And then Andy stalked Chris and wound up punching some holes in his Yamaha acoustic guitar, which I have. Andy gave it to me.
You have the guitar with the holes in it?
Yes. And It's on all the Pretty Wrongs records, the first 2, and it's on this new one as well. And we use this Gibson 330 or 335. We use that as well. His nephew owns that. but we get to use that on sessions, borrow it. It sounds great. I had some work done to it, and my brother Jimmy put some tape over the holes back in the 70s. But it sounds great.
What was Alex's relationship with Chris at the time that Chris left? I mean, was there tension between the two of them, or was he just sort of sitting back and watching Chris sort of unravel at that point?
I don't think there was tension between Chris and anyone in the band, really. It's just his frustration with the lack of success of number one record. Because
he started working on songs that ended up on Radio City, like Back of a Car and Oh My Soul.
That's correct. And as Alex said in some interview, Andy wrote a lot of the lyrics for Back of a Car. And it's something Andy would write, actually. Because Andy tended a little more toward innocence and stuff. And
right.
That's what's Back of a Car certainly fits that.
When Chris left, was it clear to you that there would be another Big Star album, or did you think, we might be just one and done?
Well, we drifted apart. And like I said, John King got this rock writers convention together, and they all wanted us to play. And, Alex said, sure. So Andy and I agreed as well. And we wound up playing, and it, what an audience. They had come prepared with drink and other recreational things. You feel good. And it was just crazy. It was crazy. But with the receptions was so amazing that, we came back together and did Radio City.
And then Alex, in the meantime, had gotten together with Richard Roseborough and Danny Jones, the bassist. And they recorded What's Going On, Maud Lang, and She's a Mover. And those songs are actually on Radio City, but it's not really Big Star in the sense that you and Andy aren't even on them.
Exactly. Yeah. It's Alex recorded those in that interim time between number one record and then the three of us getting back together. And Andy might be playing bass on one of those songs, but that'd be interesting to know. I've heard different things. But at any rate, Richard Roseborough was just a remarkable drummer. The tempos he could do, like What's Going On. He added this profound soul to and depth to anything. Richard did I Am the Cosmos.
Right.
And then, Maud Lang just sounds pretty, She's a Mover. So we tried to record those ourselves, the three of us. And it just wasn't working out as cool as those three were. So we used those.
So you were fine with those being on the album, even though they're not technically or specifically Big Star.
Yeah. I liked Richard as a person too. So I was glad that he was on.
Radio City definitely has a looser vibe to it. It's less fussed over than number one record. And, the songs on it are fantastic. Was that a more fun record for you to make as a musician, drummer?
It was different because it wasn't my first record. I mean, this was my second record and second time of being in the studio with John Fry. So there wasn't the anxiety about or doubt about, creating drum parts for these songs. And right after number one record, I'd gotten a new drum kit courtesy of John Fry. I don't know, and some new drumsticks. And I'd taken this little percussion class that was even outside of drumsticks. I mean, pulling a straw through a to-go cup lid. And I mean, there are all kinds of percussion ideas that this teacher explored, but it kind of got me back into flams and flamadiddles and that sort of thing, and paradiddles, and it kind of inspired what you hear on Oh My Soul and some other things. But in that regard, it was more fun because I was more relaxed going into it. things were, things came pretty easily for number one record, like Ballad of El Goodo and that stuff. And that came pretty quickly. It just kind of took a minute to think about how roles might develop through the song. But Oh My Soul came pretty fast. And then Life is White. That was cool. That all, but even though My Soul kind of evolved over a period of time, because we'd worked it up, and I think we'd even played it a couple of times, or at least once live before we went in the studio.
Oh My Soul is such a sprawling song. I mean, you have so many different parts. I mean, there's so many different parts of that song, and you get to play so many different styles on it. I mean, it's a rock song, it's a soul song, it's got this kind of funky energy going on. It keeps sort of turning on a dime. So it's much more complex part for you than anything on number one record, I would think.
It is. And I've just, I thought I might be playing that at a benefit here recently. And so I started going back through it again. And we didn't play it in Big Star in part. I mean, John and Ken and I could have done it, but it takes more than a minute to get that song together, the ferocity of it all. But I'm really proud of that song. Yeah. I mean, certainly, but Alex, it's like the clarion call or that ringing out of the way he starts "Oh My Soul." It's just so inspirational, and it's an injection of 200,000 volts of electricity or something.
It's a fantastic way to open an album. It's just when I first put it on, I was like, wow. And again, having only heard Big Star's Third, because I'm going backwards, having that be the first song from the next Big Star album I heard, I was like, okay, this is different. This is a different mood than Big Star's Third, and it really just jumps out of the speakers. And it's big. It's a really big sounding song and big sounding record.
Yeah, that's John Fry, and people have gone through the multi-tracks, because we still have those for Radio City, and there were other overdubs, but it all got pared down to just really what was needed and what served the song best, and that's how you hear it.
When Alex brought any of those songs in, did you think, oh, September Girls, that's a hit, that's a radio song, or I don't know, You Get What You Deserve is a song that I think a lot of people don't know, but that's something that I feel like should be in rotation on radio all the time right now.
At the end of it all, yeah. I mean, I thought they were great songs, but to tell you the truth, John Fry made them great records. Just how he treated things sonically in his mixes, and but yeah, I thought September Girls would be something radio friendly, and to just explain, Andy Hummel came up with the album title Radio City, because back then, if something was a drag, you might say Drag City,
right?
You'd tag things with city. So Andy thought the album's radio ready, so he called it Radio City.
Yeah, I love that. I love that meaning of it, because you think of, oh, is it a reference to New York or whatever? It's like, no, it's like that's Bummer City because it wasn't good, and Radio City because we're on the radio. And so
right.
Both of those album titles are very aspirational.
Yeah. There was a byproduct to that name that added some largesse to it, as in Radio City, the music hall, but that wasn't the intention.
And then again, the distribution is goofed up. You guys don't really get to tour to support it. And like, what was going through the aftermath of that record compared to the first one? Was there just a sense of, oh, here we go again?
I guess, yeah. I mean, we got great reviews, and then there was for me, there was plenty to be thankful for. Andy and Alex and I toured and went back. Well, we went to Max's Kansas City for the first time, and we went twice. One, I guess Ed Begley Jr. was part of the bill as a stand-up comic. And the other time was the Butts Band, who were the remnants of the Doors. And I got to go to New York City. That was, when Andy and Alex and I went, we stayed at the Plaza. So that was a great experience. There were so many great experiences that, it's not finding its way to commercial success didn't really bug me.
Well, Alex has always come off as someone who doesn't really care about commercial success. Would you say that was true, or is that sort of a defense he built up because he just kind of was put through it a lot?
I would say that's true. I can't speak for him, but if he's like I am, I just write to whatever I'm feeling and whatever lifestyle I'm leading at the time. And I think, to me, that's where Alex went, which was it was a reflection of his lifestyle. And that's why he was so brilliant. And his songs were so engaging.
Were the three of you personally close at that point, or was it really more of a sort of professional musician relationship?
I got to tell you, the bond that Alex and I had was music. And we never really hung out much together. And like I said earlier, Andy and I would kind of hang out via our common friend, Mike Fleming. But other than that, I had to work. I did several things, wait tables. I was the doorman at the Grotto in Overton Square. I checked IDs, and because you only had to be 18 at that point. And I was working. I was going to school. I had a girlfriend, so I had a lot of things to keep me busy outside the band.
Well, and Andy, after Radio City, ended up just going back to school full time, and that was sort of it with him and the band then.
Yeah, he's kind of saw the writing on the wall with his not being able to make a career out of it, and that's what he was all about, was to determining a career path for himself. And so he went back to school and graduated from what is now Rhodes, and I think English Lit, or he was an English major, and then he went to a tech school here and got an associate's degree in mechanical engineering, and then went on to get a master's in finance. But he wanted to start a family and kind of get on with life. I was just playing things a little more loosely.
And you guys had another bassist for a while. You did some shows.
Right. Yeah. John Lightman joined in, and we played Max's Kansas City, and we opened for Badfinger and in Boston. Max's Kansas City and New York City, and then Badfinger in Boston, and then came down and played an Agora club date or something.
You guys in Badfinger could have shared sort of management distribution nightmare stories at that point, I would think.
Well, not management, because we didn't have it. We didn't have anybody ripping us off. But it's interesting because I never said a word to any of those guys. They'd just gotten back from Japan, the Badfinger guys. And, I was a bit starstruck and didn't really know. And I walked by their dressing room, and they were sort of boisterous and loud. And I thought, I think I'll just let this one be. I was pretty shy and timid. I wouldn't hesitate a second to go and introduce myself now, but back then. And then we did 2 shows with them, and I only got to hear about 2 or 3 songs of each for some reason.
Oh, for them?
Yeah, because I was a big Badfinger fan.
How'd they sound?
Great. They sounded awesome.
If I could go back in time and see a double bill of Big Star and Badfinger, that would make me very happy.
Yeah, if I could, I'd love to see Badfinger live. And that, because it was called the Performance Center. It was a killer venue.
After that, did you think Big Star was continuing as a band? Or, I know you went back in the studio with Alex, but did you think at the time, okay, we're recording Big Star's 3rd album, or was it just sort of, we're just going to make music and see what it is?
There was a little bit of both. For me, it was recording Big Star's 3rd album, but Alex did bring up, we ought to call ourselves Sister Lovers. it wasn't an album title. It was going to be a band name.
Huh.
Uh,
because the two of you were dating sisters.
Right. Yeah. And they weren't twins. They were a year apart or so. But anyway, so we never really talked much about that. It was just more about the music and getting that done.
What did you think of those songs when he was introducing them to you for the first time? The ones that ended up on Big Star's third?
Well, you have songs like Nighttime and Blue Moon that are just gorgeous and Downs. It was like, it took me a minute, more than a minute actually, because as it was going down, it was striking me differently than the way the mixes would strike someone these days. Because John Fry was brilliant in what he did with the weirdness, certainly not covering it up, but making the weirdness more musical, in the way he placed things in the mix and all that. So, and it was Alex's lifestyle at the time too that was a bit dark, that colored the way I heard it and what went down. And there are things like Jim Dickinson played drums on Kangaroo because Alex essentially handed him a vocal and acoustic guitar tracks and said, "Produce this, Mr. Producer," as the story goes. And Jim played all the stuff around it. I mean, it really is Jim Dickinson with a guest appearance by Alex. And it depends on how you look at it, of course. But of course, when Alex turns in a song on an acoustic guitar, for me, he's one of those few people that could do that and it would be a complete thought. It was really all you needed. It's just his voice and the acoustic guitar. But Jim made it into this, for Kangaroo, this just really bizarre thing that, now it's pretty amazing. But, then in part, here's where not unlike the Beatles, I brought in Carl Marsh to do string arrangements for You. And Alex thought that was a good idea. And after he heard it, and so he sat down and talked to Carl about doing more string arrangements. And that's what adds kind of a whole new dimension to things and an atmosphere. Because like Nighttime, those icy strings and that, it helps you live and be more of a part of the song, I think.
Yeah, Stroke at Noel also. It totally defines that.
Yeah.
And For You is a solo Jody Stephens composition and a really beautiful song. It sort of grounds that album in a way. Like it fits in totally, and yet it doesn't have that quite unsettling tone of a lot of the record. How did you end up writing that one?
Well, like I said earlier, Andy had given me Chris Bell's acoustic guitar, and I got Alex to show me some chords, and basically a lot of Beatle chords. And I sat down and wrote For You on that acoustic guitar. Brought it in, and of course Alex played it a lot better than I could. But that's basically how it came about.
And you sang it as you sang, Way Out West on the last record, and you got the occasional lead vocal, and it sounded really great.
No, thanks. I appreciate it. I was excited about it, having written a song and certainly having Carl Marsh do string arrangements, and the strings are beautiful. Certainly the magic part of that song.
Yeah, that album, aside from For You and a few other exceptions, does have that feeling of someone kind of going through some sort of breakdown or becoming a little unhinged at that point. Is that what was actually going on with Alex at that, or was it that's just sort of what the songs were doing?
No, it reflects what was going on with Alex.
Was that hard for you to be around, or?
Yes. And it's not like it was that way all the time. Especially not so much when we were in the studio together. It's just events that surrounded being in the studio that were, either before or after. So it wasn't so much being in the studio with him that his particular lifestyle. His particular lifestyle really didn't get in the way of anything with the album.
But when you're referring to stuff before or after he was in the studio, what is that?
John Fry talked about it. It's when Ardent was on National from 1966 to November of 71. Nationals, that studio was in the middle of nowhere. So we'd go and stay pretty focused and working. And it was also a newer relationship with John. But by the time we moved here, our current location on Madison Avenue, Overton Square was cranking up, and it's just 2 blocks down, and they'd lowered the drinking age to 18. So all of a sudden you have the baby boomer entertainment center of this whole region in full force, and so there was a lot of drink and whatever else going on too. So that's what I mean. It's just more of indulging in extracurricular imbibements or ingestions.
Did you go through your own phase with that, or were you able to sort of steer clear of it?
No, I was lucky. I did Quaaludes the first time with Andy, and it was awesome. I never felt so comfortable with myself. And then I did it one other time, and they no longer make Quaaludes, so I don't mind talking about them. But I did it one other time and felt the same way. It was like a good drunk, but without the stomach repercussions. But it just added this level of comfort with myself. So I did the second time and had that feeling. And again, I thought, I better not do this anymore. It could be habit forming. And smoking pot, I never really liked. I tried a few times and never even tried smoking. I never even smoked pot. I tried once before Big Star and a couple of times after. And drink, I could never afford. I couldn't afford to go out to a, get sloused. Every now and then I would, because this record promoter had an office here at Ardent, and if he ever had a table at Lafayette, we'd go sit at his table, and the drinks would be on his bar tab, because he was entertaining, radio disc jockeys and people promoting his records. So it never really became a problem for me.
It seems like you were the clear-eyed. I mean, Andy sounds like he was pretty clear-eyed too. But you guys are clear-eyed people in this band, and with 2 front men, lead singers who really kind of unraveled in their own ways. And I'm wondering if that was particularly difficult to sort of watch happen and then happen again with each person.
Well, the good thing that came out of it, Alex got some pretty amazing songs out of it. As did Chris, with I'm the Cosmos and stuff. Right. It was tough to watch, sure, because you wonder where this leads to in the future. And that's what was always on my mind. What does this lead to in the future? And how is this building towards something that is going to help me to enjoy life later on? And that question was always on my mind. And that's kind of kept me kind of headed toward the direction of an education and trying to figure out something that I can establish a career on if music didn't work.
You're surrounded by these cautionary tales.
Yeah, but Chris, he got into managing. His dad owned a chain of roast beef stores called Danvers, as in Dan Turley and Vernon Bell. But he managed those, and he took a lot of pride in that, worked his butt off. And I mean, he wasn't the owner's child that you treat in a pampered way. He got in and, did the work. And so it looked like, of course, I figured that was a stepping stone to other things for him. At least that was a good sign that he could find his way in the world outside of music if he had to. And Alex, I just figured Alex would be a musician forever, which he was, because he just had he had the talent and the voice and all that, but he had something else too that they kind of would get him through later in life, I thought.
Yeah, it seems like, the music that he did after Big Star was even more kind of pushing the casual listener away. It was pretty difficult music for a while, at least. And it seems like his personality from stuff I've read, because I didn't know him, also was kind of difficult. And there was this sense of him, I don't know, just kind of pushing out. And I'm not sure where that came from. I read a biography of him and I still wasn't sure where that came from.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea.
And were you still in touch with Chris in the years after Big Star?
Sure. We'd talk from time to time and even play tennis from time to time, because he was big on tennis for a while. And played on some of I Am the Cosmos. According to Richard Roseborough, I played on 4 tracks, one of which is called Getaway. And I think there are 2 versions of Getaway, but the one I played on has it has slapback on the drums, and it's just very busy and clattering, if I might use that word, on my part.
Right. And he was, for listeners who don't know, Chris Bell died in a car crash in 1978, which I imagine was a shock to everyone at the time. He had the one single out. The rest of that album came out much later on Rykodisc, I think in the early 90s, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it was a shock and horrifically sad for us all around here, John Fry and for me and for John Dando and Steve Ray, and because Chris was a pretty deep fellow, and the connections to him run deep, in a sense, because of a part of that, and then having been a part of the band and that bond there, it was shocking.
I wanted to go back actually to a song on Big Star's third, You Can't Have Me. It's a very intense drum part on your part. And I'm wondering if there were like a lot of takes, or was that one where you just sort of went wild and they said, all right, let's keep that one. Because it's really got a lot of power and sort of a almost chaotic energy to it.
Yeah, I actually overdubbed at least one other kid on that in the middle part of it and at the end of it, maybe a couple of other things just to make it sound wacky.
Yeah. That would make sense if there's more than one drum part going on at the end, because there's a lot of percussion there.
Yeah, and it was just supposed to be kind of chaotic and clashing and clamoring, I guess. And certainly, Keith Moon was for me, I could tell that I listened to Keith Moon more than once.
And in the lyrics of that, Alex sings, "The drummer said you were not very clean, and I know what he means." What did you mean?
I don't know. People from time to time ask me that. I have no idea.
You never asked Alex, what was that about?
No. What's weird? I never
could have been a different drummer, could have been a different drummer he was talking about.
Never asked Alex about anything, really. I mean, I had this curiosity about I Was Your Butch and You Were Touched, because I just figured it was what it was. But the reality of the I Was Your Butch and You Were Touched was that it wasn't Alex, I was your butch, being a tough guy. It was Alex. There was a cartoon character, I think. There was a little puppy dog called Butch, and he would follow his owner around. And that's what Alex was referring to. He would follow the girl around like a little puppy dog. But Chris Damey told me that one.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known that.
And I always thought in Daisy Glaze, I always thought he said soon be back in drag. And I thought, wow, what a cool line, because it sparks your imagination. And whoa, what does he mean by that? Which is always fun to do in writing a lyric. But he's actually singing not soon be back in drag. He's singing soon be begging cigarette drags.
Oh.
And which is cool too.
But I never heard it that way. That's funny.
That's really when you're down and out, if you're begging drags. So I don't know. I have no idea.
So Big Star's Third is recorded like late 74, maybe into 75, came out in 78. And then Big Star Reunion 1993. Were you working at Ardent in the period between that? Like, what were you spending most of your time doing in that 15-year stretch?
Going to school. Always seemed to have a girlfriend. Working, playing in other bands, played with Keith Sykes for a tour. That was fun. Keith was in the Coral Reefer band with Buffett and wrote a song and co-wrote a song for Buffett, as he did with John Prydence and stuff. Keith runs Ardent now. So I did that, was in different bands. Group called The Suspicions, was kind of a balls to the wall sort of pop punk band. I had finished school, was a marketing major, and called John Fry about using him as a reference. John Fry, the owner of Ardent, and
right.
He said, sure, glad to say some nice things. And then he called me back and said, wait a minute, we're establishing a position here. We want to start a production company, and we wanted to boost our marketing effort. And so I came and interviewed and got the job. So that was 87, and was so from here, January of 87 through now. I was here at Ardent for part of that time in 93, and hence, Ardent has a vested interest in Big Star. So I was lucky enough to go out and pursue Big Star dates and with Alex and John and Ken.
Had you stayed in touch with Alex all that time, or had you not heard from him for a while?
I hadn't really heard from him. The guys that called, Mike Melvihill and I'll think of his name in a minute, called and, asked me if I'd like to join Alex on some Big Star songs. And I said, sure. And I said, if Alex is in, I'm in. And they found a number for Alex and called him. And then they went looking for two other people to join in and didn't have any success. So I told him to call John Auer, whom I'd met through Gary Gersh in 91. And then Ken said, whoa, wait a minute, I play bass. So both of those guys came in, and they were the perfect choice.
I remember seeing the Posies before they joined Big Star. I was a fan of those Posies records, and they were covering I Am the Cosmos in their live shows. So when I heard they were joining Big Star, I thought, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Well, yeah, that, and they released this record of I Am the Cosmos in Feel, I think, this 45. Or at least it was a 7-inch. And their versions were so dead on it. I just thought, these guys are a perfect choice for this. And they were.
And you didn't think that Alex would say yes?
To tell you the truth, no, I didn't think he would say yes.
Yeah, I remember and then Zoo was doing a live record. And I remember that they wanted you guys to redo like a couple of the songs, and Alex was just like, no, that's rock and roll. I think that Don't Lie to Me might have been the one. And they're like, could you redo this? He said no. And then after
to redo anything, but because God, Don't Lie to Me kills.
It does. I'm trying to think what it was. I know that they left off I'm Oh My Soul, but I thought it was a different song that they approached him about, saying, hey, could we just do another take of this live? And he's like, no, that was our concert. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there's actually a YouTube video of people talking to him, quote unquote, backstage. I mean, it wasn't really backstage; it was in a parking lot. But I'm there, and I ask him if he wants to do this again, and he says no. And I'm glad he changed his mind.
I am too. Because we had some really fun dates out of that. We played the Grand in London. We played London a few times, and we played the Reading Festival and festival in Holland. And I don't know, we got to go to Japan in '94. That was fun. Again, still a little more than a handful of dates, but over the years, we may have played a couple of gigs a year. I know there was one time when we went like 2.5 years without playing, but then we might do a string of dates, like 6 dates or so. But that was good. It kept me on my toes, kept me practicing and playing on my own to keep my chops up.
Yeah, I remember you talking at the time about how you've been keeping your chops up, and you sounded really fantastic in that show. Was that show in Columbia? Was it sort of a nervous energy? Did it feel good to you, or was it like a little bit of a runaway train, and you're just like, oh, how's this going to go?
I think it was kind of all of that, and that's why. I mean, there is this, for me, this really cool energy to that performance. Jim Rondinelli engineered it, mixed it,
right.
Did a killer job of that, and so we're lucky there. But yeah, there was certainly a nervous energy on my part, and I can't speak for everybody, but we rehearsed a couple of times in Seattle with John and Ken. John and Ken and I got together the night before. I think Alex arrived the morning of, and we ran through some things at sound check, and so. Gee, what's not to be nervous about? Because we didn't have that much of a running start on it.
I remember Alex's version when he sang 13. He sang it in the sort of lecherous tone, or that was my interpretation, because he kept throwing in like, "Hey, baby," and things like that in the middle of 13. And I noticed that was not included on the original live album, but then came out in the sort of complete bonus Record Store Day vinyl version years later.
Oh, that's too funny. I think "Hey Baby" was Alex's go-to thing for a lot of ad libs.
Yeah, but when it's coming from a 40-something-year-old guy singing about a 13-year-old, it was like, okay. So I'm guessing that might have had something to do with why they left it off, because that's become one of his most beloved songs, 13. I hear a lot of people covering that one.
Yeah, one of which, maybe to digress a little bit, Monoprix, this French grocery store chain, did a music video of 13. And it was longer than the track itself, so they edited it and so repeated some of the song. But it's a very cool video that advertises their store, but yet it's really a music video. And then Grace Vanderwaal stars in this movie called Stargirl. And she turns her boyfriend on to Big Star, pulls the album out, #1 record, and puts on 13. So you hear the song in its entirety. And then they do a version together, and then she does one by herself. So, and certain Wilco early on did a version of 13. Right. A lot of, Jeff Buckley. But that's another song. It's Can't Get Covered Kangaroo, and I actually got to see him do that live at the South End here in Memphis, and it was just amazing. He and his band, they were truly a band. Wow.
Yeah, there's another one lost too soon.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the reunion band at Metro in Chicago a couple of years after the Columbia thing, I think it was. And Alex made some wisecrack that totally pissed you off. And I saw you afterward and you were really mad. It was the introduction to, you guys were covering Todd Rundgren's Slut. And he kind of looks over you, goes, "This one's for Jody's wife." And you were just like, afterwards, you said that. He's like, just when you think you're warming up to a guy, he pulls something like that.
Something like that, yeah. But yeah, it was it completely pissed me off, and I talked to him about it, and he was apologetic. And
so, was he someone who actually would apologize for something like that?
Well, I'm not quite sure what it was, but for Alex, it was an apology. I mean, he really liked Diana, my wife. So I don't know where that was coming from. I think one thing he may have explained it was that she was such an unlikely person to say that about, that's why he said it.
Right. But you as her husband sitting behind the drum kit was not appreciative of those possible nuances in his wisecrack.
Yeah. No, of course not.
How did you guys get along in general? I mean, was he, were you closer this time than you were, originally, or was it more like you sort of did your own thing and came together on stage?
It was more of we did our own thing and came together on stage. And it's funny, even with John and Ken, us being in the band, when we would do a little tour, I can remember we had dinner once together. Outside of that, we'd go to some place and I might run into John, like in Malaga, Spain. Yeah, it's maybe running into John at a restaurant there outside of, but we never seemed to do anything together. And I think a lot of bands are like that. So
in 2010, I think it was when you and Andy and Alex were going to reunite at South by Southwest. And Alex had a heart attack like the day before or something like that.
Or it was on a Wednesday and we were to play that Saturday.
Right. So yeah, I think it was right before South by Southwest was starting maybe. But I just remember being just finding the news devastating as someone who'd just been a fan for so long, and also just imagining what it would have been like to be down there in that particular circumstance and having that happen right before then.
It was. Alex's wife called me, and I was in the middle of the convention area, in the middle of registration at South by Southwest. And it was like this curtain surrounded me, and it was such a weird, sad sort of feeling. And then I spoke to the person that I probably took 15, 20 minutes of not saying anything to anybody, and then talked to the person that had booked it. And everybody was just really wanting to accommodate us in any regard. And that's when, John and Ken said, hey, we need to turn this into a tribute to Alex. Did you imagine at that point that the tribute would continue as long as it has? Because really, you and, this community of musicians have been able to get together, relatively often to do these Big Star's third shows and just pay tribute to the music and keep the music on stage. And you and, Mitch Easter and Chris Stamey and Mike Mills and all these other people being able to keep playing it. Thank God for Chris Stamey. It was his idea, even before Alex passed away, to do Big Star's third live show, and complete with string section, and then of course Chris, in his great imagination, added some other things that worked out pretty brilliantly, like some horns and a percussionist, and we've done it. We played festival in Spain and Barcelona, and we played London, the Barbican in London. We played Memphis a couple of times, LA, and kind of all over this, Australia. So I love playing music, and I love the fact that there's this community that gets together not only to play it but to listen, and to be a part of that is always kind of, it's the reward for me. I mean, I certainly don't do it for the money, because there's so many of us, we don't really make any money, but it's a good time.
Of the music that Big Star made, what of it sort of stands out to you the most this many years later? I mean, it's the 50th anniversary year of Big Star, #1 record, which is kind of crazy to me, but Big Star's third is the one that's getting these concerts. Is that the one for you, or is it really just this combination, or is there one album that stands out?
Well, for me, it's how anybody that's had to listen to all three albums, it's whatever opinion they have is formed from all three albums, because they're all different from each other. And so to pick one might represent it. They all represent a period of time and lifestyle that we were leading. So, there was a bit of innocence, certainly about number one record. And then Radio City got a little more worldly and sophisticated in its attitude. And then certainly the third album, sort of what it was, an emotional unraveling is well, in part, as you were talking about. But so it's, I don't know, that if there were a song that was to define Big Star, I would say Ballad of El Goodo, because it's a little bit about all that Big Star was ever about, really. But it's hard to pick one. Yeah, I can't tell you the truth.
Well, you don't have to, so we're good.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Let's your lucky day. Ballad of El Goodo is it's just the second song on the first album, and it's got that ringing guitar sound and very earnest vocal and lyric, and the whole band comes in, and you have beautiful harmonies on it. So it really does have everything.
Yeah, it does. But of course, it's Alex singing it. I'm grateful to be able to hear all three of them. And
it's true that each one occupies its own, space. And then you have In Space, which is the fourth one the reunion album that came later, that's sort of its own thing.
Yeah, In Space is definitely its own thing. The whole idea behind that record was to write and record 15 songs, I think. So, none of the writing really started before we all got together in the studio. And I wrote a couple of things, like one night before a session, I wrote February's Quiet, or a lot of it. And then John and Hour and I got together the next morning and finished it. And we cut it that day. And then another song, pretty much the same thing. And John and Ken would contribute, and Alex would come up with some things. And I got to tell you that first week of recording, I had no idea what we had, because it was just some instrumentation. That was about it. And Ryko Disc had gotten into it. It was a leap of faith, because they didn't know what they were getting. They didn't have demos to listen to or any idea of where the album was going. But they gave us a little budget, and, we were off and running. But it in its own way, it has its place in Big Star's life.
Right. And around that time was when you started playing with Golden Smog, I think. And that was you, and maybe even a little earlier, but that was you playing with Jeff
Golden
Tweedy
Smog
and Gary
was,
Louris.
I joined in 97. We recorded for a week in 97, in like January or February, and then another week in 98 here, both in Studio C, and the album came out in 98. So
right. So after Big Star got back together, but before you recorded In Space.
Yeah, and then I did like 4 songs with Golden Smog in 2005, I think it is, on the Another Fine Day record. And then at some point we were on stage with Alex in London, and Alex said, "These guys don't know it yet, but we're going to record another record, or we're going to record a record together." And we were all excited about hearing that, and then didn't hear much about it for a year or so. And then Alex and I talked about how he wanted to do it. And I called Ryko Disc and presented the idea to him. And Jeff Rugby there was in, and he got his boss, William Hine, to sign on. So we were off and running.
And that was like the one time you actually had a record that you recorded that came out after you recorded it, got distribution, and you were able to support it. It was like being in a normal band almost.
It was, yeah. People could actually buy the records.
And you're going back to do more dates with Golden Smog now?
April 2nd and 3rd in Minneapolis. We have 2 dates at First Ave that I'm really excited about. Is
there gonna be anything more than that? Are you guys gonna record again?
I I don't know, but sure, I'm hoping it at least initiates some more gigs together. But Jeff's a really busy guy, and then Gary and Mark have the Jayhawks, and Danny's got his own little business, and I think he's still doing Soul Asylum. I'm not sure, but it's kind of tough to get this particular lineup together. But
very cool that you get to do it.
I have so much fun doing this. It just it's hard to describe. It's why I keep walking into Studio C here and sitting down and playing my drums every day. And I've been including Golden Smog songs for the last, let's say 2006, I think is the last time we played together. Wow. So, I've kind of kept the hope alive through just keeping my chops up.
Good for you. That's great. I'd love to hear you playing live again. And you've been making those Pretty Wrong records with Luther Russell, and they're really lovely. Like, they're really nice, just nice songs. You're singing lead on them. They've got this acoustic guitar going on, and you mentioned that it's Chris Bell's old guitar, which is interesting because the note I wrote to myself sounds like side 2 of number 1 record, which is the acoustic side.
Yeah, it's another thing. You keep your chops up and your iron in the fire and stuff. And I was lucky enough with Ardent that part of my job a great part of my job was networking, and so in pursuit of that, I wound up meeting Luther Russell in '91, and through the same guy that introduced me to John and Ken. And to fast forward, there's this Big Star documentary coming out, Nothing Can Hurt Me, and they want me to sing some Big Star songs at a screening. And so I invite Luther along because, I'd known him for a while and known what a really fantastically talented guy he is, and enthusiastic. That's one of his talents. He's a big cheerleader too. He just made the whole process easy. So we started writing songs, and I was completely relaxed about really sending him anything. Just hoping that something would stick, and Lucky Guy was one of those. And then so there was something else too that really got us started. And I thought, we might get 4 or 5 songs out of it, and then we wound up getting 12. 10 of which are on the album. One's on a B-side, and then there's one called Patagonia that we never released. That's just a fun song. And then after we did some, I think we went to, we did. We went to Australia on that record, and we went to Spain, and we did a UK tour, and some dates here in the States as well. LA and certainly Memphis, but then we started. I came up with some other ideas, and that initiated, doing a second album together, and these things I'd sing into Luther's voicemail initially, and then phones got sophisticated enough where I could record something, or at least maybe I got sophisticated enough to figure out how to record it and send it to him. But, it'd be lyrics and melody line, and I'd send that, and then Luther might send me, a lyric and some guitar, or just some guitar chords with a chorus in mind. Or, it just got to where it was certainly truly a great for me, a great collaboration. It's because it really is kind of a 50-50 sort of thing.
And it's making music for the love of making music, and seems like it's not surrounded by so much turmoil that other, like the Big Star project always seemed to have, at least in the early times.
Yeah, well, nobody's life is dependent on this. So it takes some of the pressure off, or all the pressure off, really, because it's a pursuit of gee, let's see if we can do this, and it'll be exciting if we do. And we did. Now we've written 32 songs together, which is 28 more than I thought we were going to do. And I'm excited about the new record and the possibilities with that and what we can do, where we can go and to perform it. Want to definitely go back to Australia and back to the UK and
come on up to Chicago.
Come up to Chicago. Yeah, we've been to Chicago, played Ginger Man there.
Oh, nice.
Actually, so
I'm sorry I missed you at Ginger Man. That would have been a fantastic place to see you.
Yeah, that was fun. Pat Sansone joined us on some things, and because Wilco had played the night before there in Chicago.
G-Man, they've dropped the injure.
Right. So we played around, and then the second record came out in I think September of 2019, and we got a gig here in Memphis at the Green Room, a killer venue in this thing called the Concourse, and then everything shut down.
Right.
So we had plans to go back to Australia and stuff, and but that didn't work. And and all of a sudden, it really everything starts with an idea, at least allowing or opening yourself up to ideas to being introduced from whatever part of the universe you're in. And that got started, and we got these songs written, and now there's just a few overdubs to be done, and it'll get mixed starting the 1st of February and probably out in late summer or early fall.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear it. And obviously you didn't plan it this way, but there's been so much loss with, like Big Star, with Chris, Alex, and Andy, who passed away of cancer like a few months after Alex, and John Fry. You're at Ardent, you're making music, and in a way, you're just kind of the keeper of a lot of flames at this point, and it's great to hear that.
I mean, that flame that I keep was certainly fueled by so many amazingly talented people, and certainly the spark and the ignition was John Fry, I think, and so and all the people he inspired and mentored in his life was just amazing. So, I'm whatever I can do, however I can make people aware of that, and I'm glad to do.
We could do a whole episode on John Fry's story, because he is the unsung hero of a lot of this as well.
He definitely is. There would be no Big Star had it not been for John Fry. Well,
thank you so much for joining me. I've always enjoyed, I remember, just having a great time talking to you 29 years ago when I saw you in Columbia, Missouri. And I've just enjoyed your playing and singing and just music making for so long. And you're someone who just comes off as just like a very centered, normal person in a business that, has taken down a lot of people. And I just appreciate that you're there doing what you're doing. So thank you. And thanks for being so generous and, insightful and thoughtful on this conversation.
Hey, I'm glad you're interested. Being in a new band like Those Pretty Wrongs, it takes me back to that point where, what you're trying to do is get people's attention to listen. And it's kind of tough for people getting started. So I just always kept that feeling of when people got interested, just to appreciate that interest. So definitely appreciate that. And one thing I don't think we talked about was, did we talk about the reissue of our first two albums on curation?
No.
Well,
I have the craft reissues that came out. Was that?
Oh no, that's Big Star. But this is.
You're talking about those
Curation Records. Curation Records is reissuing our first two albums as a double vinyl LP next month.
Those Pretty Wrongs albums.
Yeah. And so we're excited about that. Brent Rademacher, who's a band called Gospel Beach as well, runs Curation. And he kind of picked it up and was a fan, and so now we have an outlet for those and the reissues, and we have an outlet for our third record. So things are good.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's double vinyl. I know I've been on a total vinyl kick, so I would love to chase those down on vinyl.
Yeah. Fun things continue to happen. So.
Yeah, no, what I was saying, because I was saying also that there were the craft reissues of the Big Star #1 in Radio City that sound really good. And I didn't know if there was like some sort of 50th anniversary thing coming up as well. But there have been, I mean, like there's Newberry Comics colored vinyl versions of those records. Like there are all sorts of versions now. You couldn't find it when it came out, but now, you get the blue one and the gold one and the red and white one.
That's too funny.
Great talking to you, Jody. And I look forward to
Mark.
Talking and hearing you again.
Okay. Thanks so much. Take care.
That's it for episode 21 of Caropop. Thanks so much to the talented and always gracious Jody Stephens. You can catch him playing with Golden Smog at First Avenue in Minneapolis on April 2nd and 3rd. And you should check out his recent music in Those Pretty Wrongs, which can be ordered from the band's website, thoseprettywrongs.com. Big Star's #1 record, Radio City, Big Star's third, Sister Lovers, some live sets, and a later reunion album, In Space, are all widely available, so now you have no excuse. Also, follow Jody on Twitter at Jody_Big Star. Thanks to the Caropop team, including web developer Marty Rosenbaum and Luke Carlozzo, who recorded the Caropop theme. Caropop is produced by Chris Swait, who's a big star in his own right. I'm Mark Caro. Please follow me on Twitter at Mark Caro, at MarkCaro, and visit the Caropop website, caropop.com, for posts about music, movies, food, and also this Caropop podcast. Thanks.